at 102A, about halfway down the page at the two dots. So to summarize, we have a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehudah. This machlokes will be we'll point out a much sharper contrast soon. What's the machlokes? According to Rabbi Yehudah, if somebody makes a mistake, so we have the law of a mistake, which is shvach or yitzir yiser al hashvach. According to Rabbi Yehudah, this is true both if the guy did not follow instructions or he made a mistake. We give him we give the one who made a mistake or failed to follow instructions the lesser of either the cost or the increase in value. Right? So he got instructions to dye it red, he dyed it black. We give him the lesser of either the cost of dyeing or the value of the increase in value of the dyed product. According to Rabbi Yehudah, this is true both if he intentionally did the wrong thing or if he made a mistake. That would be in the case where he dyed, what was that thing called? The kalbos, the kiar, where he used the sort of the scraps, the end of the pot. That would be the same set of laws. Rabbi Meir, however, makes a distinction. Rabbi Meir says, where you intentionally disregarded instructions, then you're a thief, and you need to pay for the value of what you stole. In this case, the value of the wool. If you made a mistake, however, then we say you pay the lesser of either the cost or the increase in value. Okay. So Yosef Rav Yosef Achor Rav Abba. Rav Yosef was standing behind Rav Abba. Kamed Rav Huna in front of Rav Huna. Yosef Rav Huna Kamma. And Rav Huna was sitting there and he said, Halacha Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, Halacha Rabbi Yehudah. The halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, which we did not see. We'll get to it in a moment. And the halacha follows Rabbi Yehudah of our Mishnah. That if a guy disregards the instructions, he's not a thief. He made a mistake. And he has to pay the lesser of either the cost or the increase in value. So Adrin Rav Yosef La'apeh, Rav Yosef turned around and he said as follows: Bishlem Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Itzrach. I need you to tell me that halacha follows Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Why? Because I would think Yochav Rab Halach Karabim that Rabbi Shua ben Karcha disagrees with his friends. We do not rule like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. We rule like the friends because they are a majority. So Kamash Malon, that's what he needs to tell me that halacha kiyachid, that the halacha follows Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Now we talk about Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. What did Rabbi Shua ben Karcha say? So the answer is Mahi, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Mahi. What are we referring to? Yitanya we learned. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Imer malva b'shtar ein efron mehan milva apen efron mehan pneishu kamatzal miyadam. What does this mean? A Jew lends money to a non-Jew, and time to pay back the debt occurs right before the non-Jewish holiday. So if the debt is written down in a document, then you cannot collect the debt. You have to wait till after his holiday.
Say that last second.
If the debt is written down in a document,
Yeah.
you cannot collect it immediately prior to the holiday. We'll explain in a moment. If, however, the debt is an oral debt, there's no written document, then it is permissible to collect before the holiday. Now, why exactly would this be problematic in the first place? What's significant about a non-Jewish holiday? Is that you're thinking, right?
Well, non-Jewish holiday? Well, that's
non-Jewish holiday.
Say what?
Non-Jewish holiday.
Well, of course you don't want to pay this off them because then they'll use
it the opposite.
The opposite. Pagan idols, or
the opposite. He is paying
on their pagan holiday.
The opposite. He's paying you. He's paying you.
Yeah, you got to get him to pay.
But the reason is the same thing, though. The reason is the same reason that you pointed out. The reason is, okay, so let's explain. If he pays you back before the holiday, what's he going to do on the holiday? He's going to thank his pagan god for giving him the money to pay you back. Therefore, if the debt is written in a document, we don't want you to pay back. However, if the debt was not written in a document, then what's the choice? If the debt's not written in a document, then be happy he's paying you back in the first place. Because he could lie and he could say that there's no debt at all. So to the contrary, it's as if you're saving the money from him being able to keep it. If it was a written document, he'd have to pay you after the holiday. if it's an oral payment, be happy that he's paying you, and you're allowed to collect it even prior to the holiday. The rabbis say both types of debt you cannot collect before a holiday. So the halacha follows the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Karacha. Okay, so that makes sense. El halacha Rabbi Yehudah lamali. Why does he need to say the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah? Machlokes v'achar kach stam hi. Machlokes v'achar kach stam halacha stam. The debate here between Rabbi Yehudah and Rabbi Meir. Again, Rabbi Yehudah and Rabbi Meir, the debate is, if a guy does not listen to instructions, is he considered a thief or is he considered to have made a mistake? Rabbi Yehudah says he's considered to have made a mistake, and therefore he pays the lesser of the cost or the increase in value. Whereas Rabbi Meir says you're a thief, you pay what you stole. So the Gemara says the halacha is obviously like Rabbi Yehudah. Why is it obviously like Rabbi Yehudah? Because what we call machlokes v'achar kach stam. What does this mean? So it means as follows. We'll get to the details in a moment, but just going a little ahead, you have a mission in Bava Kamma, right? Bava Kamma, the mission of Bava Kamma says machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Meir says not listening to instructions makes you a thief. Rabbi Yehudah says no, you're not a thief. You made a mistake. You pay the lesser of the cost or the increase in value. And then we have another Mishnah, a Mishnah Bava Metzia. As you probably recognize at this point, we've learned, right? Daf Yomi, we learned Bava Kamma. We haven't yet learned Bava Metzia. Obviously, Bava Metzia is after Bava Kamma. So you have a machlokes in the Mishnah. Then afterwards, in the next Masechta, you have a Stam Mishnah. So the halacha follows, and that Stam Mishnah indicates like Rabbi Yehudah. Clearly, and we'll get to it in a moment. About a quarter of the way down on 102a.
102A?
Yep. First word on the line is El halacha Rabbi Yehudah lamali. Machlokes v'achar kach stam hi. Machlokes v'achar kach stam halacha stam. We know already the halacha is like Rabbi Yehudah. Machlokes, the debate is in Bava Kamma, the debate we just saw between him and Rabbi Meir. Let's spoil Adam mitzaveh shachar. He told him to dye it red, he dyed it black. Shachar mitzaveh Adam black, and he dyed it red. Rabbi Meir made tzimra. Rabbi Meir says you're a thief, you pay for the wool. Rabbi Yehudah im shvach Yisrael yitzia nice yitzia yitzia Yisrael shvach nice shvach. Rabbi Yehudah says that you give the lesser of the cost or the increase in value. Ustam b'Bava Metzia, we have a stam mission above Metzia. Tonight we learned kol mishana yad al tachtoina. The kol hachayzer by yad al tachtoina. The mission above Metzia is very clear. If somebody makes a mistake, he changes from his instructions. He has the lower hand, meaning he's considered to have made a mistake, not considered to be a thief. Clearly indicating like Rabbi Yehudah. So we know that the halacha is going to be like Rabbi Yehudah. Why did he need to tell us? So Gemara says Rav Huna it was still necessary for Rav Huna to inform us the halacha was like Rabbi Yehudah. I mean, I would think ain't said in the Mishnah of his time legacy. Okay, so basically the principle here is as follows. We're presuming this is a machlokes v'achar kach stam, a debate, and then an unauthored Mishnah supporting Rabbi Yehudah's opinion. In which case, halacha follows Rabbi Yehudah. There's only one problem, which is that the two Mishnayos appear in different Masechtas. And the Gemara is proposing perhaps that's not the case. Meaning, perhaps when the Mishnayos appear in two separate Masechtas, we do not say that this is considered a machlokes v'achar kach stam. It could be we say that all the Mishnayos are not necessarily in any order, meaning all the Masechtas could be in a random order. And therefore, there's no evidence in the fact that one Masechta is after another Masechta that it has any significance halachically. Okay. By the way, if it's the reverse order, if you have an unauthored Mishnah, and then Rabbi Yehudah Nasi taught you a Mishnah that has a machlokes, the halacha actually is not like the unauthored Mishnah. It's like the opinion that disagrees. Why? The idea is sort of simple. The idea is, if Rabbi gives you an unauthored Mishnah, well, then that's probably the halacha. Yeah. Let's say afterwards he told you machlokes. Clearly, he's telling you that the halacha does not follow the unauthored Mishnah. He's telling you the unauthored Mishnah first, but then afterwards he clarifies, oh, well, the difference of opinion, presumably because he holds like the other opinion. The reverse, however, if it's a machlokes, he's informing you it's machlokes. But then stam, he gives you an unnamed Mishnah, like one of the opinions, like Rabbi Yehudah in this case, that clearly tells you that he wants to rule like Rabbi Yehudah.
Case position, please, Rabbi, Psalm 102a.
1 second. Yes. 2 lines above the wide lines. Rav Yosef, according to
102a.
102a. 2
Two
lines.
lines above the wide lines.
The-
Okay, I see. I got it. Right.
3 words in it. Rav Yosef, ihachi kol machlokas achar stama nema ein sid l'mishnah. V'stam achar kach machlokasi. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. If the Mishnah is not necessarily written in order, that how do you ever have a debate followed by an unnamed opinion according to an unnamed Mishnah according to one of those opinions? If there's no order to the Mishnah, that could easily be reversed. You can never derive any significance from an unauthored Mishnah after a debate. So Gemara says you're right. In one Masechta, there's always a rule. There's always a level of organization. Things are written in order. So if you have an unauthored Mishnah followed by a debate, the halacha is like the opinion that disagrees with the unauthored Mishnah. If you have, however, a debate and then an unauthored Mishnah, the halacha follows the unauthored Mishnah. In one Masechta, that's true. I will betray Masechtas Amrinan. But 2 Masechtas, we don't know which Mishnah came first, and therefore it was necessary to tell us the halacha follows Rabbi Yehudah. However, if Yosef who asked the question, he says Nezikin is different. Why? It's the famous Gemara, Kula Nezikin Chada Masechta. All of Nezikin is one long Masechta. Right? We have it divided up into a bunch of different Masechtas, but it's really considered one long Masechta. You can learn from different Masechtas to each other. V'bai Seimar, and other possibilities. Okay, another answer is, it's not just that this is a stam machlokes v'achar stam. First debate and a stam mishnah. That mishnah isn't just an unauthored mishnah that casually says a halacha. The proper way to understand the Mishnah in Bava Metzia is that the Mishnah is saying major rules. And the major rule is not listening does not make you a thief. So it's not just an unauthored Mishnah. It's that it's listed under a major rule, as a major rule. So obviously Allah would follow the major rule. Okay, last line of 102a, a little bit of a hard Gemara. It sounds like our Mishnah. Okay, so what do we have? We have a business venture, right? So Jules, you're joining me on the venture? You'll be the investor. You'll be the investor. You'll be the investor. Okay, so Jules is the investor. He made the
first. I'll watch and see what happens.
He made the big mistake. He made the big mistake.
He
He made the big mistake of investing with me. He told me to buy wheat. Okay, sure enough.
It was cryptocurrency.
Sure enough, I went to Eric and I bought barley from Eric. Eric was selling barley.
And then converted to cryptocurrency and found a sucker.
Or the opposite. So Aaron he told me to buy barley and I bought wheat. Okay, so what do we do? Tanichad, the one brisa says, "Impachsa live, my siro live." Okay, so I failed to follow the instructions of the investor. So one brisa says that if it turns out the investment went my way, then I get to keep the benefits. And if I lose money in the deal, then I lose the money, not you. In other words, you're out of this investment. It's clearly I'm a thief. I stole the money because I didn't listen to instructions, at least presumably. Which opinion, by the way, does that sound like? Rameir or Rabbi Yehudah? Sounds like Rameir's opinion, right? Rameir says that
50-50 chance.
Rameir says that not listening to instructions makes you a thief. Sounds like the same opinion. We'll crack it open in just a moment, but that's what it sounds like. V'tanya idach, v'tanya chada. Another brisa says, if it decreases, if the investment goes bad, it's my responsibility. Me as the one who took the investment money. The imhaisiru, but if the deal made money, haisiru la'emtza, I have to split the money with the investor, with Jules. So the brisa seem to contradict. Rav Yechon proposes like Kasha. There's no debate here. Hara Meir v'Hara Yehudah. The opinion that says that I take the loss and the gain personally, that's because they understand that I'm a thief for failing to listen to instructions. That's the opinion of Rameir. And the opinion that says that if I lose money, I take the loss. But if I gain money, we split the gain. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Yehudah says it's a mistake, which means I have a lower hand. What's the lower hand here? I get the losses, but I don't get the upside. The upside split. The losses are all mine. Okay. This is a Rameir that says Shina Kaina, meaning a change acquires it, meaning I'm a thief and I've acquired the money by not listening to the investor. And the other opinion is Rabbi Yehudah that says that a change does not a change in instruction does not necessarily mean that I'm a thief. So I don't actually own the investment, but I have the lower hand, which means I get the full downside, but only partial upside. Okay. Now I should clarify that in this capital investment, I'm the trader. I get 50% of the deals. You're the investor. You get the other 50%. Okay. Maskev or Belozer. Belozer proposes mimai, not necessarily. Dilma atkan like Amar Meir el amid the chazil el gufay avlaschara loy Amar. Rabbi Lozer proposes a little bit of an alternative, and it was interesting. It just came up as a story that happened. Similar type of story. So Jules is the investor. I'm the trader. Obviously, you think that I know how to trade. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing the deal. So presumably, even though Jules told me to buy wheat, he doesn't care that much if I buy anything that I think would be a good deal. Okay, 1 second. So El Omer Rabbi Lozer says, Harva Meir. Both opinions are Meir. Okay, so as follows: if Jules told me to buy the wheat because he was hungry and he wanted me to bake him bread, so then if I fail to follow instructions, I'm a thief. Then again, I have full upside and full downside because I stole it. It's mine now. However, if Jules told me to buy it as a business deal, so presumably Jules' request that I buy wheat is only a suggestion, and therefore, if I change because I failed to follow his suggestion, I get full downside, but the upside we share 50-50. I'm not a thief for failing to follow instructions because there is some sort of accepted range, and even though he did give a suggestion, but it is understood that it might get changed. And because of that, I'm not considered a thief. However, failing to follow instructions still gives me the lower hand. Okay, now we get to a very important Gemara. In Marova, the rabbis of the West, they were laughing at Rabbi Yehudah. Here's the problem. Eric, now you become the hero, the protagonist of the story. Aliba de Rabbi Yehudah. Here's a fundamental question. I carry investment money. I walk to Eric to buy the wheat or the barley, the opposite of what you said. When Eric sells it to me, who does he think he's selling it to? Presumably, right? The simple logic is that I never said to you that I'm an investor. You never thought to give the wheat to Jules. You thought to give the wheat to me.
You're like a shell company.
I'm sorry?
You're like a shell company.
Well, that's irrelevant to you. To you, you don't know anything about that.
But I don't know you're a shell company.
Exactly. You're interacting with me. So if you want to say that Jules gets the upside, then it has to be that Jules actually owns what I'm holding. But who told you to give it to Jules? Nobody. Exactly. That's why you didn't give it to Jules. You sold it to me.
Right.
You sold it to me. So the key idea here of the Bnei Marova is the rabbis of the West in Israel. Their key idea is as follows. You sell to the representative. The guy carries the money. You're selling to him. You don't sell to who the money belongs to. And again, so now Rabbi Yehudah says, according to Rabbi Yechon's interpretation, that by me not listening to Jules' instructions, I have the lower hand, but Jules still gets the upside. That presumes that Jules has a stake, and I'm not a thief. But how does he have a stake? How do you have a stake in it? And when I sold it to him, he sold it to me. He never knew that you were an investor, and I wasn't listening to instructions. So by buying it from him, that is a stealing. That is a stealing. You should have no benefit in the upside and no benefit in the downside either. It doesn't belong to you. You hear the question?
Yeah.
And this, the Gemara proposes, is a debate between the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says because Jules was an investor in the money, when you sold it, you sold it to whoever has the money. And because you're an investor, you still own the investment, even if it wasn't according to your instruction, and you have 50% of the upside. However, the rabbis of Israel say no. The rabbis of Israel say no. You sold it to me. You sold it to the one who's carrying the money. I'm carrying the money. I buy it. That is an act of thievery, and effectively that exempts you from the upside and the downside. It's completely my responsibility. Together?
Yep.
Okay.
But aren't you an authorized dealer of jewels, or are you saying you're known to jewels that you're doing?
That's the big question. That's the big question. Well, you didn't know about that.
Right.
And then this is something that we'll really have to go in now. Okay. Is this an argument? Is this an argument? Are you always in other words, is it the case that every person who sells is always thinking about selling it to the buyer, the one who appears to be the buyer, or maybe he always thinks about selling it to the one who's actually paying the money, not the one who's paying the money, the one who owns the money? Maybe that's an intrinsic part of selling things.
Maybe he doesn't even know.
What?
Maybe he has no idea.
He doesn't. Well, maybe he doesn't need to know. He's selling it to whoever owns the money.
Okay.
Whoever owns the money is always buying. Whenever somebody sells something, they're selling it to the one who's paying the money.
He knows it.
I'm sorry, the one who owns the money, not the one who's giving the money. Yeah. Okay, so now we have the question is this a legitimate argument? Meaning, is it a legitimate argument to say that you need to know who owned the money, or else you're selling it to the guy who carries the deal? That would be me. Instead of the one who owns the money, that would be you. That would be a joint between me and you. Me and Jules. Okay. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Maskef of Shmuel Bar Sasarti. Very interesting name. Probably the only time that name shows up in Shas. Shmuel, the son of Sasarti, has the following question. Ihachi, is this a legitimate argument? Then even if I listen to instructions, let's say Jules told me to buy wheat, and I went ahead and bought wheat. Well, how did Eric know that you own the money to buy the wheat? He didn't. So then, if this is logical, then I should also own the wheat because Eric never knew that Jules owned the money. Fair?
Yeah.
So well, if I own the wheat, then I was acting as an agent. The problem is when I fail to follow instructions, I'm no longer acting as an agent. If I'm not an agent, then he sold it to me, not to Jules. Okay, the dummy. It's as if I'm acting on Jules' behalf. Teda, I'll prove it to you. Now we learned. Okay, so okay, so what happened? The guy this guy sanctified every one of his assets to the temple, or he made a commitment to the temple that's larger than the money he has. So he has a net worth of $10,000. He pledges $20,000 to the temple funds. Okay, so he has to give all his money effectively, except certain things he can't give. What doesn't he give? He can't give his wife's clothing, and not with his kids' clothes. Let's say he got a new garment and he dyed it, and it was a female garment. It was going to his wife, or it was a kid's garment. It was going to his kids. That also belongs to them, and that can't be collected. Even if he buys brand new shoes, and today we buy shoes, shoes are like a joke. To buy shoes every couple of weeks. Some people have, or even a year or 2 years. Those days, shoes lasted way longer than 2 years. If you remember the Gemara we had in Gittin, the guy wanted shoes that would last him a lifetime. He died the next day. That was the comical story, right? It was when Shlomo Melech was carrying Ashmedai, the king of the demons. Okay, whatever it is, but shoes lasted a very long time. So even if the guy is buying new shoes, which are very expensive, if the shoes are kids' shoes or his wife's shoes, then you can't collect it. Gemara says, hold on a second. The guy is buying clothes for his wife. Well, who told the guy selling the clothes that he's buying the clothes for his wife? Okay, well, his wife, you might think it's obvious, right? but let's say it was his kids. Let's say it was kids' clothes or something. Who said that he's buying it for his wife? In other words, it's still his. the seller of the clothes sold it to the husband, to the man of the
For
house.
his mistress.
What was that?
To buy
Maybe.
for his
Okay.
mistress.
Okay.
There-
But or could have been buying it to do business.
Yeah.
But who said he's buying it for his wife? It must be Allah. So it must be that since he obviously is buying for his wife clothing, it's as if his wife bought it. In other words, we're trying to establish there's a difference between when Eric sells it to me, whether I'm acting as an agent on your behalf, on Joel's behalf,
Mhm.
or whether I'm acting, I'm a rogue, doing my own. So Gemara is that when I'm acting as an agent, Eric, no, he's still to Jules. And seems to be a proof, right? Because I've sold all my assets. I bought new clothes, whatever. The guy sold his assets. He bought new clothes for his wife. Who told the guy to give it to his wife? Must be because his wife told him to buy the clothes, acting as his agent. Therefore, it goes straight to his wife. Even the seller may not know that. So clearly we see you act as an agent, the seller doesn't need to know. He gives it to the guy who's the agent. 1 second. So Rabbi says not necessarily. Loy. Rabbi says it's not necessarily a proof. This argument of Shmuel Bar Sarasarti is not necessarily a proof. Why? Because somebody sanctifies his assets. He does not have in mind his wife's clothing. The logic here is not because his wife owns it. The logic is because it's excluded from his assets. In other words, you want to know what's the person's assets? Nothing to do with his wife and kids. And that wasn't, even if technically he actually owns it. If it was going to them, he decided not to include it. Gemara says it's well, 1 second. Does a person think that when a person is worth $10,000, he gives a $20,000 donation? Do you think he meant to give his tefillin? What do you think?
Well, it depends who's the donation to.
Temple.
No, he wouldn't probably know.
He wouldn't give his tefillin. Presumably, he wouldn't give his tefillin. He needs to wear his tefillin every day. He wouldn't need to wear his tefillin. But yet the halacha is it's not we learn tefillin. If a guy gives us $20,000 donation, his net worth is $10,000. What do? We take his tefillin, we evaluate what they're worth, and we tell him, okay, use your tefillin as collateral and go borrow the money and pay up your obligation. Well, you'd think that that's probably excluded. And the answer is that presumably nothing is excluded. That's the implication. Meaning, we're trying to say that a person has in mind when he sanctifies something.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
A person has in mind when he sanctifies something. That not to include his wife's clothing, but you might think that he doesn't have in mind to include his tefillin also. But that's not true. His tefillin are included. Because he doesn't have in mind to exclude anything. Everything is included, and that should include his wife's clothing as well. 1 second. Oh, 1 second. Oh, so Abaye says no. There is a difference. Person does have in mind to sanctify his tefillin. Somebody who sanctifies his assets, he thinks he's doing a big mitzvah by giving this $20,000 donation. So he's happy to give his tefillin as part of the mitzvah. But he does not have his wife. He does not have in mind he does not have in mind his wife or children's clothing. Mishum Eva, so as not to create an animosity between them and him. Okay, Masla Rav Ashi says one of the examples is Erechen. I'm not going to go too deep into Erechen, but let's say that Erechen is a fixed amount. There's 2 ways you can give a donation. You could say it 3 ways actually. For our purposes, there are 2 examples in the Gemara. One is the guy says, I'm giving a $20,000 donation, and he only has 10,000. And the other one is he says, I'm giving Erechen. And let's say, for our purposes, that Erechen is a fixed amount. Depends on the age and the gender of the person, but it was more than his value. His net worth was $5,000, and let's say, for argument's sake, that the Erechen of his age, his gender he's a male, was $10,000. For argument's sake. Okay, what's the point here? But let's learn the laws of Erechen. Utnan, it's second line above the wide lines on 102b. Utnan, we learned Chayve Erechen Mashkin Noisei. the laws of Erechin allow you to collateralize all of his assets. The Gemara says, does a person have in mind when he gives Erechin to have to collateralize his assets? Rabba says, okay. Presumably, he doesn't have in mind to collateralize, but it doesn't make a difference what he had in mind. All of his assets have to go to pay his debt, his obligation to the temple funds. Okay, if this is the case, then we have no proof to the concept that somebody acting as an agent, the seller intends to give it to the one who's on whose behalf he's acting. In the case of this example, I act as the agent of Jules. Jules told me to buy wheat, and I decide to actually buy wheat. It's considered as if Eric sold it to Jules. We try to bring a proof from this Gemara that me acting on behalf of my wife meant that Eric gave it to my wife, but it turns out there's no proof. The reason is entirely different. The reason of when I sanctify all my assets, it's as if I've given my wife and kids their assets. They're not included under my assets, not because I'm an agent. So there's no proof to this concept that even where I am acting as an agent, if the seller does not know this, he gives the money directly to Jules. It could be maybe the seller doesn't know. Maybe the money goes to me because I'm the one who's interacting with him. Okay. So this question still remains unresolved. Again, we have a debate here. The opinion of the rabbis of the West is that in the case where I misrepresented the investment, I failed to follow the investor's guidance, then the act of engaging in the investment, buying the product from Eric, is considered thievery. And Rav Yochanan and Rav Shmuel Bar Sarasarti are saying not. They're saying otherwise. They disagree. They say, no. This is a mistake. And in a mistake, Jules shares the upside, but not the downside. I take responsibility for the downside and don't get the full upside. Together? Yes, I did give a disclaimer here. Okay, this is a weird scenario. We'll have to explain this in a moment, but just hold off on the questions for a minute, okay? Somebody buys a property in the name of his friend, okay? We don't force his friend to sell it. If he makes a condition, we force him to sell it. My kamma, what does this mean? This is what happens. Okay, so let's explain briefly. Well, before we see it inside the Gemara, I'll just explain it outside. What happened was I was buying a property. So I had a great idea. Instead of me buying the property, I'm going to say that the governor, okay, who's that? Ms. Kotek, she bought the property. I'm actually acting as her representative. She's buying the property. Well, what do you think is going to happen here? Anyone who's thinking of laying claim to the property is going to think twice now. Nobody wants to start up at the governor's office, right? So it's a cool strategy. So now now the governor's not going to know, he's not going to care. So I'm going to live on the land, pretend as if it's the governor's, and I'm acting as their agent, and nobody will fight me. Okay. So now as follows. Now we don't force the governor, that would be Ms. Kotek, to write me a document selling me back the field, unless I specified with the seller that the transaction should only be valid if the governor writes such a contract. Now you're probably wondering, like, nobody asked the governor to join our discussion, right? We're sort of hijacking the authority of the government, and not only that, we're also mandating that they get involved. Because if I make a condition, the governor has to write me a personal document. What a privilege, right? It's like, where did this come from? We'll get to it. He bought a property from his friend in the name of the governor. We don't force the governor to sell the buyer the property. Right? We have a seller and a buyer. The buyer claims to be acting on behalf of the governor. The governor does not have to write a document to the buyer.
Rabbi, is this the Reish Galusa we're talking about here, or is this just a generic term for governor?
No. Probably the Reish Galusa.
Okay,
He's
is
giving
there
you-
significance to the fact that the example is like the top dog in the country's administration?
No, so not quite. The top, it would be the top religious Jewish leader.
Right.
The Reish Galusa was the head religious Jewish leader. He did have some amount of summary judgment where he was able to whip. I don't think he was able to kill, but I think he was able to whip people or
Okay. Oh, I like
execute
him already.
execute
Go ahead.
monetary law. Okay. It's true. The Reish Galusa probably had more power than the governor, if that's the point you're trying to make.
Yeah.
But I think that's beside the point regardless. I don't think it makes a difference to this Gemara. But if I make a condition with the buyer on condition that the governor writes me a personal contract afterwards,
Mhm.
so then we force the governor to write a contract.
Mm.
Amar Mar, let's examine this. We don't force the governor to write me a contract. However, the governor acquires the property. Hold on a second. Lema pliga de bnei Merava. This seems to disagree with the opinion of the rabbis in Israel. Who told the seller that I'm buying it on behalf of the governor? So the Gemara says, "Im shem halai kasha going to Oiding lebal sadav Adin Sadi." Well, that's not so difficult. I told him. That's how he knew. I told him I'm acting on behalf of the governor. So this is not really relevant to our discussion. Let's just finish. Let's point out here. El Ema Seifa. Once we're at the subject, there's another problem here. El Ema Seifa. Amanas kaifin esiresh glus elimkar. Let's say I made a condition with the seller on condition the governor writes me a personal contract. So then we force the governor to write a contract. The Gemara says, I don't need a free property if he didn't make the condition, and I'm not a real estate agent that you're going to start forcing me to write documents. Like I have no party to this. I never was invited to the party. Nobody ever told me about this. Why am I responsible to start writing documents? This has nothing to do with me. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
So what do I have to get involved? Is what Ms. Kotek would argue. El Amr Abayas says Hachi you have to change the price. Okay, let's try to give a different interpretation. One second. Okay, so what happened was I did the same game. I claimed to buy it on behalf of Ms. Kotek. Okay, what happened? But I said, you know what? I want actually a second document. I want two documents. One says it's sold to Ms. Kotek. We'll keep that quiet. The governor will never find out about it. She's too busy with other things, right? And then I'm going to write a separate document that I'm buying it. So when I need to sell it, I have a document that says I bought it. When people come to think about taking away my property, laying a title claim, I'll pull out the Ms. Kotek contract, and they'll say that she bought the property. So it's a good shtick. So we don't force the seller to write two documents. But if, however, we did make a condition, then we force the seller to write two documents. Amar Mars. Let's go through this again. Okay, so you don't force the seller to write two documents. Pshita, that would seem to be obvious. The seller wrote you one document to the governor. Why would he have to write a second document to you? Just because you tried to play a game doesn't mean the seller has to accommodate that game. You didn't tell him about it. I would think you probably realized, even if I didn't tell it to you, you probably realized I was playing a game. The seller probably realized that I never represented Ms. Kotek, and I was doing this all as just a way to scare off anyone threatening to lay a title claim. I would never throw money on to buy property for the governor who doesn't know me and I don't know her. Okay, Ella, I died at the cost of Lashar Achrita. I only did this on with the understanding you'd write me a second document, a personal document, because that was the real intention of the deal. Kamash Malon, Damerlay, in Yono Avdi Lacha Bahadi Ahud is obviously the seller can say, well, maybe I thought you had some sort of arrangement with the governor. It's not my responsibility to go in depth and see that you're playing a joke. I don't really care. You pay me the money, I sell you the property. You want to make it out in the governor's name, maybe you have some sort of arrangement. I don't care. It doesn't make a difference to me. Okay. Who does obviously? Maybe you have to maybe you have some sort of deal with the governor. The governor has a deal, and he or she will write you a document. If you made it, you specified with the seller, I'm sorry, that you want a second document. One document with the governor's name on it, the other document, a personal document. So then the Gemara says you have to write it. Pshita, obviously you have to write it. That was the condition. So Gemara says, let's okay. In other words, what happened was the guy said, I want 2 documents in front of the witnesses. So I would think but that was the guy said he wanted 2 documents. It's not clear. Did he want 2 documents in the name of the governor? Or did he want 2 documents, one for the governor and one personal? That's the question. And the Mishnah is saying, no. Obviously, if he wanted 2 documents, he wants the personal document too. That's what he's really after. That's why he put witnesses to make sure that he that he wants 2 documents. Okay, one short Gemara. Rav Kahana Yov Zuza Akisna. Actually, we should stop here. Stop here.
Let's go.
Really a separate Gemara. We can say it tomorrow.
What was it?
Okay.
Any document that the government would I have a seal?
Yeah. So
How can you fake out the-
yeah. So this guy is clearly